Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to talk about cleanup in Adobe Animate, and specifically the technique that I use here. So I've done some prep work right here, and I have my rough animation layer right there, and I use the paintbrush tool, which is right here, for this animation right here, but it doesn't matter which brush you're going to use because we are going to create a new layer on top of this in order to do cleanup. Another piece of prep that I did before this is I created my swatch library right here. Remember, you can go to Window and Swatches to find that panel and start kind of creating that. And we're now ready to get started here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press plus right here to create a new layer, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on this and press cleanup right there. Something else you might notice right here is on the rough layer, something that I've already done is I've taken the opacity down from 100% to 50%. So to do that, if you want this to just be lighter than what your cleanup right here, remember you can right click, go to properties, and change the opacity from visible to 50% right there. Something else that I'm going to do before I start working is I'm going to lock my rough layer right there. So I'm just going to lock that so that I don't draw on it by mistake. So now we're ready to start. So for my cleanup, what I like to do is I like to actually use the pencil tool and for my line work, and then I'll fill in using the paint bucket tool. That's my preference. So for the pencil tool, I'm going to first, if I were to draw right now, it's grayed out because you can see it's on the rough layer, so I need to make sure that I'm on my cleanup layer. Fortunately, I locked it, right, so that wouldn't be a problem. And when I draw, that's not the right color. That's like a light gray thing. And so what I want to do, I'll press Edit Undo, is I'll click on the stroke color, and I'll pick the color from my swatch library, the dark purple, that I want my line art to be right there. So the first technique I'm going to show before we start drawing on this character right here is a really important technique, and this is kind of like the cutter tool in Toon Boom Harmony right here that I'm going to do. So I have the pencil tool selected, and our concern right here is the object drawing mode right there. So right now, object drawing mode is turned off. Okay, and so I'm going to draw a horn, and I'm going to have these extra edges on purpose right here. And so that button again is off, and when I go to select, you can see when that button is off, I can select, and it's pretty smart about selecting these different zones right there. Okay, so that's going to be the mode that I tend to prefer to use. So with the pencil tool, I'm going to draw the same thing, but this time, and sometimes you have to draw in order for the properties panel to switch over, is I'm going to engage object drawing mode, and I'm going to draw the same thing this time. So now the button is highlighted white. Oops, my hand slipped there. Right, so drawing the same thing, and I'm going to go up to the selection tool, and now when I select, you can see I can move these layers around independently, and you can't really do that in the other mode. So it kind of depends on what you want to do right here. And we can change this back and forth after the fact. So if you've already drawn something and it's not in the mode that you want, don't worry, we can change that using the selection tool later. So I'll go over that soon. So, but let me first stay on track right here. So I'm going to delete this real quick, and right here, this is the drawing that I did. Remember where I had the pencil tool engaged, and this button was grayed out right there. And so something you can do is like the cutter tool in Adobe Animate is I can click right there that's highlighted, press delete, highlight right there, press delete, delete, delete. Now I have a clean horn right there. And so that can be an effective way to do cleanup. And then when I do the paint bucket tool later, it's going to, let's select the right color right here. So I'm going to click on here, select the main color that I want to use, and paint bucket in. I have some clean artwork right there. So that's kind of the main idea. So one thing I promised to show you here, and I'm going to show it before we start filling in this character, is let's say, for instance, that I use the pencil tool, and I have that button turned on. So I have, oops, I slipped again. Let's see, I have this button engaged, and so now when I do the selection tool and I select, I can move it around because we're in the object drawing mode right there, and that can be really helpful. But you're like, okay, but now I want to do cleanup right here. So what you do is you, with the selection tool, we'll select the whole drawing right there, and then we're going to press let's see here, this button right here. So I'm going to press edit undo and keep my cursor over it. So it's break apart right there. And so I'll just, again, select the whole drawing right here, press break apart, and then it turns it into the same kind of drawing where I can delete these extra handles right there and clean up the artwork, right? So when you're drawing, there's ways to get back and forth between object drawing mode and a broken apart version right there. So don't panic if you've kind of completed a drawing and it's not the mode you want. You can change it after the fact using the selection tool and selecting your marks, and it'll give you the option to break it apart or turn it into objects mode right there. Okay, so I have my first drawing right here, and I'll just start. I'm going to zoom in, press Z to zoom in, and I'm going to press Shift Y to go to my pencil tool right here. And I can see that my stroke color is that dark purple, which is what I want to use for my line work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw in my horn right here. And again, I like to just draw with a little handle like that. I'm going to just press edit. Don't be scared to press edit undo if it's not exactly the way you want. And we'll clean this up later. And cleaning it up is really quick. And so when I draw a circle like that, you can see there's a little bit of like a blob that happens right there. If you want to clean that up, I'll show how to do that here in a moment. So Shift Y. Okay, I'm just going to keep moving through the character here. Okay, so I have a lot of the character drawn here. And so something I'm going to do here is I'm going to mix this up just to kind of show you that you don't have to use the pencil tool for all this. Is I'm going to switch over to the rectangular tool and go over to oval. And right here, for the fill, I actually don't want this to have a fill, right? So I'm going to click on the fill color. And then as you go up to right here and click that, so it's this little top corner, a little red diagonal line right there, and I click that. Hopefully when I draw this, the inside is not going to have any fill color to it, and I'm just going to have that outside stroke right there, which is what I want. And I'm holding Shift because I just want this to be a plain circle at first. And right now I've drawn that in objects mode. So I might want to press Q or go to this tool right here just to shrink that and get it closer to where my original drawing was. And so I could have done this for the eyes and all that stuff too if you want more of like a less of a hand-drawn feel to your character right there. Okay, so I have that drawn in, and when I select this, let me just zoom out just a little bit, and when I select this using the selection tool right there, you can see I'm in objects mode. And so now I want to break it apart to clean it up. So I'm going to press this button right here, and you can see it changed the way it looked when it was selected. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and again with the selection tool, I'm just going to go in and delete these extra handles that are right here. And you can see it's very smart about the way that it does this here. Okay, and so something else you can do is for cleanup is I can click here and go to the subselection tool. I usually press the shortcut A to get here, and if I click on a line, you can see I get these anchor points. So particularly if you're familiar with Adobe Illustrator, this is really similar to using the pen tool. So I can like select an anchor point and delete it right there. I can select an anchor point, and it's got these two Bezier handles where I can pull those out a little bit and just kind of fine-tune things and move them around right here. So that's kind of one form of cleanup that you can do right here. You can also zoom in, and I mean that looks fine to me right there, but I could, if I wanted to, like come in and like delete, you know, like this anchor point right there and just get involved in the cleanup process. So similarly, let's look at this eye. I have that little tiny little thing right there. You see that? And notice that I'm using the selection tool now, and I've broken this apart, and if I just click, let's see if I can get that selection. So click right here, I got the main eye, and if I click right there, I got that little jut out that I have right there, so I can do that. I can also press A or go to the Subselection Tool and click on this, and I can see that there's still a few anchor points right here. So if I really want to clean this up, I can go in and delete some of these. So one thing you can do too is I deleted some of those anchor points, and again I'm in the Subselection Tool, and I move this out. And so let's say I want to bring this back in and snap it to that point. Just make sure that when you have the Subselection Tool on and you're kind of manipulating this pencil tool line that we had created, that this button is turned on. So this is Snap to Objects, so it's the big magnet tool right there. And when it's turned on, when I do that, it'll snap to that initial anchor point. And if I have it turned off, when I drag it, it's not snapping right there, right? So just make sure that that's turned on. I'll bring that in, snap it, and I can continue to kind of manipulate this with the Bezier anchor points. And again, I'm just in the Subselection Tool this whole time right here. And oops, let's see here. So remember, you can also delete anchor points right here, bring that back in. And I've kind of gone over this a little bit before in a previous tutorial. The less anchor points you have, the more clean the line is generally going to look right here. And remember, we also have the pen tool right here, where if we click it and hold it down, we can add new anchor points in there. I can delete anchor points by by two ways. I can use the Subselection Tool and just select an anchor point and press delete. I can also, in the pen tool, I can go down here to minus, or just press minus on my keyboard and click right there, and that'll get rid of that. And remember, I can do the convert anchor point tool right here, and what that does is when I click it, it turns it into a hard edge. But if you have a hard edge that you want to turn into a rounded edge, you can click it again, and there we go. It's just having trouble getting there. And you can turn it into a rounded edge right there. So again, and I pressed A to start moving the Bezier handle again. Sorry, I need to announce every time I hit a shortcut right here. So I pressed A so that I could kind of start to move these handles again. So I'll delete that anchor point again, go down here, and move that up. And so that's a big reason why I like to use the pencil tool for cleanup, is when you're using these fill brushes right here, manipulating things with the Subselection Tool and the pen tool gets a lot trickier in there. And it's just really helpful if you want like a clean design right here and just want more control down the road. Okay, so I have that one drawing right there, and right now it's lasting the whole time. So let me I'm going to select this frame right here, hold Shift, select out to that point. I'm going to right click and go to Remove Frames right here. And so now it's only lasting that long right there. Okay, so let's go ahead. And so generally when I'm doing cleanup, I like to kind of get it to clean line work like this. And then I'll go into like filling in the whole character. But it just really depends on the way that you like to operate right here. For the purposes of this tutorial, even though I usually just kind of worry about clean line work right now, and you can kind of hide the visibility of your rough layer right there to kind of see what it looks like. So I like to get it to this stage, and then I'll start painting in the character, right? For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to go ahead and fill in this character so we can kind of see how that works. So I'm going to make sure that my rough layer is locked. I'm on my cleanup layer right here, and you know what? I'm going to hide the visibility of my rough layer. So I'm on my cleanup layer right here. So let's start to paint in our character here. So this should be pretty easy now. So remember, I'm going to use the paint bucket tool right here. We're going to use the fill color, so meaning this big box right here. My character is going to be pink, so I'm going to fill that in. And it looks like I'm going to run into an issue with the mouth. We'll work on that. So let me click on the fill color again. I'm going to go to my dark color. I'm going to use dark eyes right there. And this is actually good that we're having a problem right there, so I can show how to problem solve that. For the teeth, I'm going to keep those just a plain white right there, so I'll just fill those in right there. And then for the horns, I'm going to use a lighter pink. So I'll click in here, and again, notice I'm using my palette right here for all this. Okay, so let's look at why this fill didn't work right here. Right there, so you can see, so I zoomed in, I went to my subselection tool right here, and then I'm going to zoom in right here, and I could see it right away, is this right here. I need to make sure that my snap to objects is turned on. I'm just going to snap that right there so that these are all joined. And so now, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see if that worked. So I'll press K, go back to my paint bucket tool, go to my fill color, and I'm going to fill in a dark color right here. So now it fills in right there. So whenever that happens, where you press fill and it doesn't go all the way in, press A or go to the subselection tool and zoom in on the area that you think might be the problem. Another thing you can do is the paint bucket tool. So I clicked on the paint bucket tool and I go to properties, and we have this box right here where we can choose to close larger gaps right there, and I'll go ahead and engage that just to help avoid this issue in the future. But I'm really glad that that problem kind of showed its head so that you can kind of see it as it comes out. So one last thing I'm going to do is and again, this fill-in stage, again, I'm just going to emphasize one more time that this is something I usually do right at the very end, and usually I'm just worrying about clean line work at this stage. But I want to add some highlights in their eyes, so some specular highlights. So I'm just going to go to the classic brush right here. Remember, this is a fill brush, so I'll go to white. That is way too big, so I'm going to press the square bracket tool to make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Boop, boop. So now I have specular highlights in their eye, and it helps kind of add some life to the character right here. So one other thing that might come up in the future is you might want shadow on your character right here. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. I use a completely different technique in Toon Boom Harmony than what I'm about to show. But I'm going to go to the pencil tool right here. And remember, the pencil tool is, again, it's a stroke brush. And I have this color right here. So this is the color that I made in my swatch library that's for shadows. So I'll click on that. And let's say that I want the shadow to run something like that. All right, so I'm going to fill that in, and I'm going to make sure that the line goes over, both sides right there. And then I'll use the paint bucket tool and fill this. Give me 1 sec. Okay. Oh, what am I doing? So the fill color right here, and it's right there. And also notice there's a problem with my line right here. So let me redraw this line right here. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, sorry. All right, a couple mess ups right there. Let's try this again. So I have the pencil tool, and both the pencil tool and the fill color is that same dark color right there. And I'm going to try it again. And this time I'm going to go all the way through like that. And so now I'll press K. And, oh, right, so that didn't work. So I'm just going to press this. And I need to go to break apart mode right here. And now it'll work. Okay, so the reason that this didn't work before is that I drew this and it's in object mode, right? So in the pencil tool right here, this button was engaged, right? So one way I could get around this is I could disengage that button before I drew the line. If you drew the line and it's in object mode, you can tell because it's got that blue square around it, no big deal. I can go back to my selection tool, select that line that I just drew, and press the break apart button right there, and you can see it switches to the broken apart version. And so now when I do the paint bucket tool, I can fill that in, and when I press V, I can select my initial line. And something I like to do is I like to just basically delete this whole line right here, just get rid of the line. And one more, bam. And so now I have a clean character design with a shadow on it. So let's do that again for the next frame. So we're going to kind of apply this one more another time for the next frame. So I'm going to move up to the next frame right here, and I'm going to insert an empty keyframe by pressing that button right there. And I want it to last the same duration as my rough animation, so I'll press this button to extend the frame or insert a frame right there. So it's still empty, but that's because I haven't started drawing yet. I'm going to turn on the opacity of my rough drawing layer underneath, and I'm going to engage onion skin right here so that I can see my most recent clean drawing right here. And remember, when you're doing cleanup right here, I'm not going to worry too much about this in this demonstration, but remember that you kind of want to see both your rough drawing and your cleanup, because you, how do I say this? Your rough drawing, you're kind of still working out your ideas, and your cleanup, you can see that the volume of my character might have changed a little bit here on my cleaned up version to my rough version. So when I'm doing cleanup on this, I might want to make this just a little bit bigger so that it matches my cleanup drawing a little bit better. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the process again. So I'm going to press Shift Y or go to the pencil tool. Make sure that the stroke color is the dark color right there. And, oops. And I'm going to draw this horn right here. I'm going to redraw that. Okay. And so this technique, talking about the animation here, it's called smearing, where it's almost like it's one way to kind of do motion blur. Well, we have a lesson that we're going to talk about on the different kinds of smearing, smudging, and motion blur that you can do right here. Okay, and so last time I drew a circle for the character, and I'm gonna opt for a more hand-drawn kind of option right here. So I'm gonna just stick with the pencil tool and draw this by hand. So I'm gonna draw this here. And remember, we can clean this up after the fact. Okay, so we have some cleanup to do on this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off onion skinning so that we're just focusing purely on this drawing right here. And so let's get started on this. So you can see when I did this, I did the selection tool and selected this, that I drew this in object mode, which can be helpful because if you want to move some things around, you have the option to do that here. Remember, with the selection tool, if you hold it in the right spot, so your cursor looks like that, you can kind of change some of the proportions right here, which is super helpful. Okay, so next I am going to press A, and I'm just going to very quickly just delete some of this and clean up some of this work. Remember that the magnet tool is turned on, so I'm able to kind of quickly snap things together right here. And you just kind of want to delete the extra anchor points that just aren't kind of carrying their weight right here. There's kind of, I can tell there's an extra one nestled into there. And yeah, just get that outside shape working a little bit better right there. Okay, so don't obsess with this too much, right? Because this is only up for 3 frames, but just a little bit of work right there. Okay, so I'm going to switch this over to the break apart mode right here. So I'm going to go to the selection tool, select the whole thing, and then I'm going to press this button right here. So I'm under the selection tool, I've selected everything, and then I'm looking under properties, and I'm going to look for this button where I break everything apart. And so now that's going to let me use like the cutter tool the way that I would in Harmony. And I'm just going to do some basic cleanup on this. Oops, okay. All right, so we have this character filled in, and I'm just going to press A one more time and just zoom in on some areas of concern right here. Oops. What's happening in here? A little bit of weirdness happening right there. Let's go back to the selection tool. There we go. Let's delete that. Press A. And I'm going to go to my pen tool, down to convert anchor point tool. Draw that out. So I've cleaned that one up. I see another little tiny area right here, and I'm being like extra picky on this just so that we can kind of see everything here. So I'm going back to the main selection tool right here, and you can see I select it like that. It looks like that. All right, I'm going to press A, snap that together, and P minus, which is a shortcut for the deleting anchor points right there. Shift C, which is this tool right here. So you can just kind of clean up your lines. And so once you get used to the shortcuts, this gets a lot easier and a lot quicker right here. Something else I can do is I can hide my rough line art, because that's just kind of getting in the way a little bit, if anything, right now. And right here you can see there's a gap that happens right there. So when I do the paint bucket tool, it won't fill in most likely. So if I just snap that in, I can press P minus, which is again the shortcut for the delete an anchor point right there. Delete that out, and hopefully that'll fill right there. And then let's just take a look at the teeth. It looks to my eye that that'll fill. Okay, so we have that in. All right, so let's start painting this character in a little bit. So I'm going to use my paint bucket tool. Go right here. I'm going to fill in my main color first. Right there. I'm going to switch to my eyes and inside the mouth right there. I'm going to switch to the teeth. Fill those in. And the reason I'm filling those in, even though it's white and this is a white background, is sometimes if you export and it's not filled in, it can be transparent in the teeth, you know, stuff like that. So the horns are this pink color right here. And I'll fill in the rest of these specular highlights at the very end right here. Okay, so now we have 2 frames right there. And so I'm just going to go to the selection tool, and let's turn on the visibility of the rough layer so we have 2 drawings down. Okay, so at this point you can stop watching this tutorial if you want. If you still kind of want to see this in action a little bit, I'm going to keep going here. So I have this next frame right here, so I'm going to do cleanup on this frame. So I'm going to click right there on my cleanup, and I can see my rough animation is locked, which is important. I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. This one's only going to last 2 frames, so I'm just going to go to the next frame, extend the keyframe to there. And I'm going to turn on onion skinning so that I can see the most recent drawing. I'm going to go to the pencil tool. And right now, if I drew with the pencil tool, it would be light pink. So I need to click on that and just choose my line, the color that I designated for my line art right there. Okay, so time to draw. So Shift Y to get to the pencil tool. And you can see I'm doing a little bit of like squash and stretch right here, just to try to be fun. And if you don't like doing the cleanup on this work, remember you can go to the oval tool and click on the fill color, make it an empty fill right there. And you can draw out your eyes like this. Press the selection tool, select it, and then you can move it, right? So if you don't want to do the cleanup the way I was doing with the pencil tool before, you can just do that process. So again, I'll do it again for the other oval tool. Make sure the fill color is empty right there, and then the stroke color is the way I want it. So, oops. So I'll just draw that out again. Selection tool, and I can move this around after the fact if I want to. All right, so I'm going to shift back to the pencil tool for the mouth. Oops, I'm going to redraw that. My hand slipped and I could see the line got cut in half. Okay, and I'll do the pencil tool again for this outside. So, and notice I'm not necessarily tracing my rough line art because it's just more of a guide. You know, it just depends on how careful you were with your initial line art. So I have some cleanup to do on this. So right here, I'm going to turn off the onion skin. go to this frame right here. So now it's time to do a little bit of cleanup right here. Remember that with the selection tool I drew in object mode, so you can do things if you want, where if you hold the cursor in the right spot, it's fighting me on this. Let's see here. You can, change the proportions if you want to. I'm mostly okay with this. So I'm going to press A or go to the Subselection tool and just kind of look at this a little bit. I think I can clean this up. Fine. So that's just a way for me to check that. So now I'm going to go to the Selection tool, select everything, and then I'm going to break it apart by pressing that button right there. And so now I'm going to use what I call the cutter tool right here. So in the selection mode right here, I'm just going to select these extra handle lines that I don't want. Oops. Okay, so I'm just going to go back into A again, so the Subselection tool. Zoom in on this. This is a little bit of a problem area right here. So just going to delete some of these unneeded anchor points right there. Then I'll press Shift-C. Actually, you don't even need to press Shift-C. I'll stay in the Subselection tool and just make sure that line looks okay. And I could go in and clean up this line work a little bit more, but I think this is good enough for what we're doing here. So I'm going to hide the visibility of my rough layer underneath. So that makes it a little bit easier just to kind of see what you're doing. There's less distractions, and this drawing now has to stand on its own, which can be helpful. You can also use, so I'm selecting this anchor point right here. I can use the arrow keys if I want to just kind of nudge it down gradually right there. I don't think I need that anchor point or that one. So I'm going to delete those, select this, and then again I'm in the Subselection tool right there, just moving the anchor point up a little bit right there. Alright, so I have the next drawing. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill this in. And yeah, and again, I'll say it one last time, is usually in this process I'm just kind of getting it to this point and getting my animation looking perfect that way, and then I go to filling it in like this. So let's see here. So to start things off, I'm going to press K or go to the Paint Bucket tool. I'll zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to switch my color. I'm going to fill in the main color first of my character. So I'll fill that in. Then I'll go to the darker colors, which I'm doing the eyes and the inside of the mouth right there. Then I'm going to go to the teeth. It's helpful to kind of keep the same order, just so that, especially if you have a more complicated character, it's just becomes like an assembly line kind of thing right there. All right, so that one's mostly cleaned up, and I'll add the shadow and the specular highlights soon right here. Or you know what, I'll just go ahead and add the shadow first, just to kind of show that technique again. So I'm going to turn back on onion skinning so that we can see that again. And I'm going to switch to the pencil tool, so Shift and Y. Remember, this brush right here is a stroke brush, and this is my shadow color right there. So my shadow is like the light is coming from the right side of the screen, and so the shadow is on the left, and it's kind of underneath the horn right there. So I'm just going to draw this line through. Oops. Like that. And if I go to do the fill brush, it's probably going to not do the right thing. All right. So the way to fix that is I'm going to go to the selection tool. I'm going to click on my line, and if I want to make any adjustments, I can right here. But I'm going to click on break apart so that it turns into that kind of line. So now when I do the paint bucket tool, and I'll choose the fill to match the same color, I'll fill that in. And now I can delete out my original line art right there. So I have shadow right there, and let's go into the next frame right here. So same thing, Shift Y to go to the pencil tool right there. The colors are already engaged from last time, so I'm going to draw that like that. I'm going to select it, and right now it's in object mode. I'm going to break it apart. I'll press K or go to the paint bucket tool, fill this in right here, and now again I'm just going to select this line. If I double click it, by the way, it selects the whole line right there, and so if I click it once it only selects, does the cutter tool, but if I double click it, it'll select the whole thing, and I can just delete that out right there. Okay, so yeah, adding shadow is really easy right here, right? And it adds a lot to your artwork. This is a big part of my personal animation style, is I almost always have some kind of shadow component going on. So right now, let me turn on the visibility of my rough drawing layer, and I'll press play. Right, and I'll loop this and make sure the loop goes the whole duration. Okay, all right, so let's do one more. So last frame, I'm going to insert a blank keyframe, go to here, extend it out, and oh, you know what? Here's a trick. All right, so I'm really glad we got to this. I nearly forgot. So I'm going to turn off onion skinning. Look, so this drawing right here is a copy and paste of that drawing right there. So let's copy and paste this drawing right here. Let's save some work, right? We don't need to redraw this character entirely from scratch every single time. Sometimes it can be effective to copy and paste frames here. So there's a couple ways to do this. And in the future, and this will be important for like production pipelines and stuff like that, is we can create like a library with symbols and things like that to make assets just repeatable and stuff like that. But right now, I'm going to show a simpler technique, which is I'm just going to select this frame right here and press Command C, or you can go up to Edit and then Copy right there. I'm going to go over to this frame. Remember, I inserted an empty frame right here. Now press Command V or Edit and then Paste. And let's paste in place. It doesn't matter. You can paste it in center or paste it in place. So now I'll just select the whole thing. Whoop, move it over to that spot right there. So I didn't even have to draw the whole frame right there. So the last thing I need to do, oops, and there's a little mess up. I see it right here. This will happen. I bet some of you probably saw me do this and I missed it before. With that line right there. And let's turn off my rough drawing layer. And so now I just need to add specular highlights right here. So I'm going to go to the classic brush for this. Remember, the classic brush uses the fill color, so I'll use white, or I should use the white that's in my swatch library right there for character 1. And let's turn on onion skinning for this. Oops. And so one thing you can see right here is one of my characters are hidden underneath each other. So one trick you can do right here, and this is super important, so I'll be sure to bookmark this in the YouTube tutorial, is this right here. So this shows all layers as an outline right here, but you can do it one by one. So on my cleanup, I can turn on show it as an outline. So if you're having trouble figuring out where things are in terms of where your shadow line was or where your specular highlights were from a previous frame because it's going on top, just click this button right here and now you'll be able to see it. And so now I'm going to go to my classic brush tool right here. You see, so when I'm drawing with the onion skin turned on, I get a sense of what it looked like in my previous frame. And remember, with onion skinning, you can kind of set the range and make sure that you're on the frame that you want to be drawing on, right? So my playhead is now on the 3rd frame right here. And then the last frame, the specular highlights are already drawn. And so remember, you can turn this back on and test your work right here, and I'll turn off onion skinning altogether right here. And we have a cleaned up animation.